Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to take a look at the matchups of this weekend of the LEC. I won't be live viewing them. My plan is to just review the big games as per usual. I think it makes a lot more sense. Didn't get co-streaming this time around, which is fine. You know, it is what it is. We deal with it. We grow at our own pace. I will be reviewing the big, most interesting matches. Basically, I have this idea of making the series called The Big Three, where we basically follow the three biggest teams, most interesting teams within each region. I think that I want to do it for the LCK, following HLE, T1, and Gen G, and we're going to do the same for, of course, the LEC. We have Fnatic, G2. I think the third one we need to kind of determine, but I am feeling the KC storyline. I am kind of excited for the roster. All right, Team Heretics versus Rogue. So I've broken down my thoughts and ideas about the players and the teams in previous videos, but let's talk about it once again and do it in the context of the meta. Like just to loop you guys in on where the meta is. We're basically seeing a lot of Vi, Wukong, Skarner permaban with insane presence. We're seeing a lot of Victor gameplay, which is nice for some of our mage players like Larson, or for example, Mr. Humanoid. We have some mage players in the league. Varus super strong, long range AD carry is very similar to the last World Championship. We have Varus and Ashe at the top with some Corki gameplay. Corki is a champion that is not performing super well. I see it losing in most games. Currently at 10 and 22. I think that as a mid laner, it's not super exciting. As a bot laner, at least it can do DPS to tanks, but it does suffer in some of the matchups. I think Corki is something that you might see come through more in the BO5 Fearless. The format for, of course, the LEC is BO1 single round robin over 3 weeks. So there's that. K'Sante is still OP as ever. There's also Jace top lane that is tremendous. Rumble, Renekton, Gnar. Ambessa is also a champion that is doing super well and looks very strong in the fights. I think that this is pretty much where we're going to see top lane. As a support, what stands out to me as most OP, if anything, is just Rel. Rel is a champion that just has received enough buffs to be super strong. I don't think that Rel has any big weaknesses. I think that Alistar as a counter is like fine, Poppy is fine, but I do think that it's entirely playable for Rel. So Rel as a blind pick is something we're going to see a lot. To pay attention to Labrador, he loves this champion, of course. Nocturne Orianna is also seeing some play. I think that in scenarios where you don't have Fearless, I think that there's a world where all the other junglers are going to be prioritized first. I think that Nocturne is something that comes through on game 3 and 4 and 5. I think that the other champions we mentioned a little bit better. Something to highlight here is Kalista is 11 and 0, which is kind of nutty. I do think that this is kind of skewed in my mind based off of teams that are stronger playing it against weaker teams. We have Jiwo here, and we have, for example, Berserker playing it. Maybe let's just take a look at top leagues. I do think that regardless if this was 6-0 or 7-0, 0-7, I don't think it matters too much. I still think just Kalista's strong. So just Upset and Hansama are definitely going to look to pick it, probably going to be banned against him. I don't think Draven is in such a good state, personally, unless your AD carry is called Hamza. But I think in regards to the rest of the meta, it's like mid lane. What do we got mid lane? Mid lane just the usual Yone, Silas, Akali. We have the Galio as an answer into APs, which is pretty solid. And then Talia has been coming through, but also a champion that is picked a little bit later. So it's not something that I don't think will be super relevant in, of course, the games in the LEC. Super mentioned Rel. Otherwise, we just have like a lot of Rakan gameplay to be expected, and then the potential maybe Lulu swing into Rakan together with Jinx. All right. Now let's take a look at the teams. Team Heretics versus Rogue. So Team Heretics is an unknown quantity to me. It's an unknown quantity to me, but I have to be honest, it's not a team that, gives me a crazy amount of excitement. I did rate this team as one of the lower ones coming into the season. But I have to admit, it comes from a position of knowing less. The parts that I do know when it comes to, like, I watched Camilo play in a tournament. I did think that he didn't perform that well outside of like the opening games. I think that Sheo was not the driving force in BDS in my mind. I watched Stand as well, watch him through his pro view. I don't think that he's a super talent. Like, this is a very, very hard job for the coaching staff, which is, in my mind, relatively unproven. So Team Heretics, I don't rate too highly. I do think that Rogue should be winning this opening game. Like, they carry so much, experience into this match in comparison to the opposition. And I do think this could be a very, very, this could either be a great mix or a horrible mix. I don't know where to land. But I like the fact that Chick is coaching and you got Jonghoon and Malrang playing together. Like, these guys could be like the most dangerous homies of all time. So I think Rogue is going to win in the first initial map. We have Vitality versus BDS. Vitality versus BDS. I do think, like, I am concerned about BDS when it comes to 113 and Paros. I think it's really, really big shoes to fill, especially in the support position. I don't care how hyped you are as a support. If you come into the league, it's very, very hard to perform insanely well from the get-go, because all the other supports that are legendary in the league, if you think about Mickey or Hilly or even Labrov, these are players with a shit ton of experience. I think experience is king when it comes to support position. So I do think that Team DS lost some of that, but at the same time, Irrelevant, I think, is a big upgrade over Adam. Vitality is a team that started scrimming very, very early with Stand instead of Hilly in the off-season, so that's good for them. And I do think that Nagnako as a player has, just fix the camera, has potential as a player, but I don't know how Team Vitality is solving the ratios of the previous year with these players. The hope is that the rookies are more willing to cooperate. So there's that, more willing to cooperate. And maybe, just maybe, this is going to be the solution to the problem. Because if you think about Vitality, last year, their macro was just so dry and bad as the game progressed. Kaz and Hilly still have it in them to be like one of the most strong bot lanes in the league. But Hilly, of course, didn't have the best year last year either. But as we always say, Hilly seems to be like an indicator of the overall health of the team. And it seems like they weren't meshing well with Photon and, of course, Viteo, which are, of course, very selfish players. So maybe having rookies now all across the board, Linkas and Kazi and Hilly having a little bit more experience together, maybe something that can land and maybe they can do well. But I'm skeptical. I think in the short term, probably I'm leaning BDS, but I would have to see how BDS kind of pan out with Paros and 113. GX versus SK, I think GX is going to cook them. GX is a team, in my mind, they're kind of like, I would kind of call them almost, for me, they're like almost the anyone's legend of the league, in the sense that they don't have their own personal Tarzan, but I do think this is a team that is going to reach their peak relatively fast, which I think is very useful in BO1s. I think Giants, this is definitely like a roster that in my mind can get first place in like a BO1 format. Because I think that the roles are so defined here. I think Jack is a super exciting player. Noah and June have a lot of experience together. And I think that this is a roster that can definitely get first place in the regular season of the round robin of the BO1s. But I think over time, teams like G2, Fnatic, and even KC and Koi could like overtake them. But I think in the LEC format, it is very important to hit the ground running. And in Winter Split, I think Giants can definitely do a lot of damage. Because this is just how, in my mind, I envision Giants, So I think Giants is going to win this one. Koi versus Fnatic. Naturally, I think Fnatic should be the favorite in this one. They have a superstar-studded roster similar to 2022. They started out a lot earlier. They practiced. They seem prepped. I think that Upset and Mickey combo is going to be tremendous. New coaching staff. I think it's important for Fnatic to, start well. I think that's super, super important for them to start well, build some momentum, because there's a lot of pressure on the line too, Like this is a team. I think anything below like top 2 should be a very big disappointment. And I think that always when it comes to Fnatic and all the players involved, you know, it's like your career is on the line, you know. It's like these are always your chances to win titles or don't, you know. I think that Fnatic should be favored against Koi in the first map. KC versus G2, I believe is the match of the day, which makes sense. It's a bigger, just giga hype matchup. KC versus G2. KC versus G2. I think G2 should be favored. I think G2 is my favorite to win, of course, the split. Mostly because I think that they have built enough of a foundation to start the split the right way. I want to bring you back to the spring split that they won with G2, with BB and Tagamus and so forth. And I think a big part of that was just how well they handled the off-season, carrying over into, of course, you know, just the spring split starting. And I think that they carried momentum super well. I think from speaking to Romar as well, this is a team that knows how to set a team culture from the get-go. And I think this means super much. I think that everybody else has a lot more adjusting to do. You know, Fnatic is adjust to new coaching staff, new players. G2 have a very similar core in Caps, Hansama, BB, and then Dylan Falco and the rest of the coaching staff. They lost Duffman, added Memento full time, which is super cool. But I think all in all, you know, G2 should be the favorite to win the split, and naturally also the favorite to win this matchup against KC. But I do think KC have good chances. I think KC have good chances. Just I hear rumblings that this is a team that is doing well, you know, in terms of how they are competing. So that's cool. I think that mechanically this is a roster that has a very high ceiling. I'm assuming that Kana should start off the split way better than he did in his first opening split in the LEC. I hope we get to see more of the Kana in the ending, which is super good. And I think Yike, Vladi, Kalis, like these are players that in my mind mechanically can compete. And the main question is like, how is this team going to maintain composure on stage? That's going to be the ultimate test. Like, how are they going to maintain composure on stage? Who is going to be the leader in the game? Is it necessary? Because in my mind, Vladi and Kalis will be forced to be quite vocal on this team. And I think the same thing for Yike, who is moving from G2 into KC. We've always made the same inference and same conversation always over and over again. I do think that for Yike's personal development as a player, he needed to let go, like he needed to be moved from G2 into a different team, because you could see he stagnated, and I think in a lot of ways life was a little bit too easy on the Summoner's Rift for him in G2, and I think that made him stagnate as a player. I think his freedom in the end went too far. I think that this is a team where he needs to carry a lot of responsibility and kind of reshape himself as a player. But there's a lot of what ifs, right? A lot of what ifs. I think KC can be very competitive, and I think it's just a question of how they make use of their time. Rhea, Apples, and Wadi, you know, this is the core KC. You know, if it wasn't for like Striker being BDS, like these are the OG KC coaching staff. They are now working together on the main team. These guys are also slowly building up experience. They have done well for themselves in the LFL, and now let's see how they do it and pull it off in the LEC. I think still G2 should be the favorite. That's day one tomorrow. I think that covers it. We'll talk about the next day in the next video, because then we have more info, we have more data, we see more what's going on. I will probably look to review the last matches. We're going to do breakdowns of the last matches tomorrow before LEC starts. And I think these are the matches that are the most interesting for sure. Koi versus Fnatic, KC versus G2. All right.